So we've heard a lot in the last couple of days. Storytelling, we've just heard even more about, and some great stories there. Technology, but the other big thing we're all interested in, of course, is how the changes we've seen over the last decade, the accelerating changes, are changing the relationship between the advertising agency, the media owner, the brand, and the consumer. So it's not quite a triangle, maybe it's a cube, but those relationships are definitely changing. They're changing constantly, and today we've got a small conversation with a couple of people from the agency world to just explore how we all work together. How does this work in this new era? So I'm going to ask you quickly to welcome to our charming fireside chat area, which lacks only a fire. So I want you all to imagine the fire in this fireside chat. And joining me at the fireside, please welcome from MediaCom, Dirk Fromm, and from Razorfish, Alina Hückelkamp. Hi. So first, both of you, thanks for joining me here on this high-pressure stage in front of this, frankly, terrifying audience who are, A, some of them slightly hungover, but B, most of them quite interested in what we have to say. But I think if we can just promise not to throw objects at our two representatives of the agency world, we'd be very grateful for that. So thanks very much for joining us. We had a sort of a little conversation before the whole thing started. And I guess the first big question would be the one that I've just posed to the audience. It really has been an astonishing period of change. You know, a decade ago, perhaps a little more, we all knew how this worked. You know, you had a media owner, you had an agency, you had some consumers, and the brand went to the agency, who went to the media owner, who put them in touch with consumers. Really simple. Everyone made a living. But it's changed an awful lot. I wonder if I could ask you both in turn what you've seen to be the biggest change that you're experiencing and how it's kind of affected your business. And perhaps if I could start with you, Dirk, and then turn to you, Alina. Yeah? Cool.
I brought some fire somewhere.
Very good, yes.
It's been a massive change, and I don't know who'd ever expected that. It was just tremendous. And I think there's two major building blocks that have a substantial influence on what's going on. One is obviously we as a media people, media planner, communications planner, we've never been as close to the consumer as we are today. It is, you know, we've got a deep understanding what the consumers are doing, what their attitude is, what their behaviors is, what their surfing behavior is. So really it is a, if you want to name it, communications planner dream, facilitated by data, technology, and everything else. That's a tremendous change. If I look at the entire industry, I think the one thing that changed dramatically, coming back to the good old days when there was an agency, a client, and the media owners, I think it's frenemies. What we, you know, in every meeting, you need to decide a new context of your meeting. Very often, you're front with the media owner and you're looking for a solution for the brand to most powerful reach out to the consumer and change behavior and attitude towards the brand, create new imaginations. The next day, you're probably an enemy because the media owner is pitching for the same bit of business you are pitching for. And it is really the one thing that completely changed the way we work together within the industry. And the big word for me is frenemy. We're meeting frenemies every day.
And that is really, and I'd like to come back to that in a couple of minutes and how that works in terms of people, the kind of people that are working for each side. Is there now, maybe there's some poaching going on between the two, and we should certainly kind of come back to that. So, Alina, your background and your expertise, looking particularly at the technology side of things, that has changed enormously. I mean, Dirk mentioned that we've now got an understanding of what the consumer does that would have been impossible, you know, a couple of decades ago. But also things like the switching of media buying to basically machine-driven algorithms, which mean that old-fashioned people like us are redundant when you can get a piece of software to do things much faster and much more efficiently than we ever could. Has that been a big change for you, and how has that changed your business? How has it changed the way you have to think?
Yeah, definitely. So I think the biggest change for us was really starting going into a dialogue with the customer and, of course, getting this great insights. But from the media planning, it's totally changed, especially at Razorfish in the United States, because they have huge media budgets from brands. What they did really is that planning, the strategy building of it, and then talking to the media publishing. But what changed completely is that kind of planning process is not necessary anymore. So machines are doing that. And I think this is great, by the way. So we can really concentrate on the strategy. So really looking for new opportunities, using technology to make everything more efficient and more value creating for the customers outside. So that's really the focus for us at Razorfish, to really say, where is the value in it and how can we create more value? And now not how can we do the same thing over and over again and make a greater margin out of it.
So that's really interesting. So for you, technology has not sort of taken away the creativity from humans. It's released us, it's liberated us to do the more interesting work around strategy.
If you compare it to a vacuum robot, that's one of my favorite things, doing your households, they do the vacuum cleaning. So I don't want to do that. So that's great, right? I want to do great things at my home. I want to make it more beautiful. I want to invite guests. I want to have that wonderful home feeling, but I don't want to do all the crap. So it's good.
Great. I'm going to be straight on the phone to some of my friends who are media planners and explain to them they've now been replaced by a vacuuming robot. I will really, really enjoy that. So, tell me about the people then, and then we'll come at this from two sides. On the one side, I'd be interested in what sort of people are now needed for this new world, and secondly, to your point, what's happening in terms of media and agencies competing for the same talented staff. Once upon a time, an agency would never have, they wanted the creative people, but they didn't necessarily need the sort of specific media skills. They do now, and media owners would never have needed to think about planning or whatever's replaced it, or even particularly strategy on behalf of clients. What sort of people are we getting? I mean, Dirk, how is this working out for you? Is it harder to get people? Is it easier?
I really want to build on what Alina just said. The one thing is, if we somehow have an element of technology and automation within the industry, what we need is very smart people to master those machines in two ends, actually. One is the machine will do whatever it wants to do, shit in, shit out. So it really needs us to master the machines and give directions, especially in that world of confusion outside where, there's so much data, but you don't see the data. You don't see the people anymore and everything else, and you don't see the actual interaction. So what you need is smart people to master that data. And I agree, it's basically creativity, consultancy, and being a client's advocate to manage around this media ecosystem, if you want to name it. On the other hand, I really, really want to, we are about 700 people in our agency, and I agree, most of them actually grew up in an era where there was media planning skills, strategic skills, media buying skills, and that all is changing. The one thing which is absolutely not true is that these machines do their job without us, even in implementation. When we're talking programmatic, it's not two machines just talking to each other. It's actually people mastering those machines talking to each other. And that's really important because we tend to forget, and look at your own internet experience. It's all smart and easy, but however, you invest time to actually book your right holiday, to whatever, get the best deal on a car when you go to your holiday. You have to invest time. And that's absolutely true and essentially important for everything we do in a programmatic world.
So this is a parallel here between what we were hearing yesterday about in media. There's a need for engineering, for technology people, not to be separate, but to be integrated into the business. Alina, is that true on the agency and the media buying and planning side as well?
Yeah, I think this is true for all organizations that are existing in the moment. So you have to combine, especially if you are in the content business. So you have to combine, of course, your storytelling capabilities that you already have in the media, but you have to have data scientists. And these are the hardest crack to find, really, these kind of people who are not just developers, because developers are the same like the vacuum cleaners, you know, or the media planner, who are just doing the job over and over again. You have to have really creative intelligence person who are understanding what they're doing, and they have to love change. If they don't love change, don't hire somebody who's not able to adapt and love the change business. That's really important. And then the third thing, of course, you need to have a strategist who's good in really adapting and seeing what is coming in the future, and also, again, loving new technologies, loving new things that are happening, not to be so nostalgic. I heard yesterday so many things still in that conference that felt like you don't let go, you have to let go, and you have to love the future. That's really important to survive and not being disturbed. But of course, we're all fighting for the same talents, and I would love to have some content people from your side, and you maybe like to have some data scientists from my side, so that's the game.
In a moment, I want to move on and ask the really difficult question about what the role of the agency is anymore. When a brand can talk directly to some of the groups we've seen on the screen in the last couple of days who can do everything, why is the agency there? I suspect you both have an answer. I'd be interested, though, just to open it up to the audience. And if you do have a question you'd like to put to this expert panel, sort of feel free, because it isn't very often you get two people as senior as this from the agency world here to answer your difficult questions. So just wave your hand and I will get to you. But let's return to this question of technological change has meant that while we agree that it doesn't replace the human input, it does mean that brands are more sophisticated, they're taking on some of the clothing and the skills of what used to belong to creative agencies. Increasingly, they're even taking on the skills that belong to planning and buying agencies. Is there still a role for the agency? And if there is, what is it? Alina, what is it that you and Razorfish do that a media owner or a brand couldn't?
Yeah, so of course, planning and buying was not really always our focus. It was really building platforms. What changed is that we are now building content platforms, and we use an algorithm to get the content and make it smart and of course, personalize it So our role, of course, changed from being more like that broker in between, more like the strategy consultancy partner, and really help as Razorfish now, and also I open up my own shop now. It's really changing your organization to be adaptive for what is coming. So I think that's critical, and of course scaling up all the content production capabilities and having an understanding how the platform ecosystem is working and what you maybe should do as a brand or not do. So we are still, I would say we are more partners, not frenemies. But I would love to talk more with the creative people and not with the sales people. And I have the feeling that often media publishers are bringing the sales people in and not the creative ones. And we need to partner with them.
So that's really interesting. So we should be getting more of the creative side of the media involved with people like you, rather than always a salesperson in a suit.
Definitely, I hate that. So at Cannes, for example, you have that big meetings with the big media companies. And my former boss, Bob Lord, he's now the boss from AOL. And he said, well, come on, Alina, let's talk together. And I said, yeah, of course, let's talk together. And then he just brought 4 salespeople. And I said, I don't want to talk with them. There is nothing that we have interest in common. Of course, we all want to make money, but it's about value creating. And I can't talk with a salesperson about value. It's always about volume.
Quite right. Could I just check, anyone here from a sales background in the room?
Oh, sorry.
Okay, you can all leave. We're finished with you now.
Don't hurt me.
Who's from an editorial or creative background? I'm there. Brilliant. Okay, so you're amongst friends. It's absolutely fine. So, Dirk, I guess same question for you. Why do we need you?
I love that question. I've been in the industry for quite a couple of years now. And I think the demand for us has never been greater and bigger than today. That's not a saying because I feel in a bit of a defense or anything. It is because there's, our primary task is to create snackable content and find the right connections for consumers so they can actually, they want it. Today everything is, everything is your choice, you know? You're not forced anymore to follow any screens or guidance or storytelling applications. You're absolutely free in everything you're doing in that media ecosystem. So the priorities are snackable content and find the pivotal moments in connections to actually engage with consumers. If you now think you go to Facebook or Google or National Geographic, I apologize, I really love the pictures, but and think you can have that conversation with those guys, motivated by sales, ambitions, and obviously that's a very tough conversation to have. They will never ever use their data and their insights and their platforms, let's see Facebook and Google with video, to suggest you should also include Facebook video content corporations within the same environment. They will never do. What they want to do is really sell their very own items and their very own assets. And I think it's absolutely fair.
Yeah.
That's my role. What we'd love, and I'm really building on what you said, is really close cooperations with the guys who are actually editing and publishing, so we can create more snackable content that in two ways finds a good balance between what is relevant to consumers in general, but also what might help our clients' brands to grow in the future. And that balance is thin, and you got to find it, and you got to make the content snackable.
Yeah.
But I think that's what we're looking for.
So this is really interesting. From a media owner perspective, and I'll still keep myself in that camp for the moment, of course we love the idea that a brand comes directly to us and doesn't talk to anyone else, but the role for agencies is still in understanding the broad spectrum of media brands that are available and then dividing resources between them to achieve an end objective.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and secondly, I think we learn faster because we have more brands. We not just have one platform and one brand, we have like 100 brands, for example, and have an overview what works and what not working.
Yeah.
So I think that's for us really what makes our work more valuable for you or for brands, that we learned with McDonald's that we can use it for Audi, and then next for DHL. So that's the kind of learning process is way faster at our side.
And I'm sure all the media owners in the room would love to share some of that learning, and you've already said that you'd love to work with the creative side of the business. Tell us a little bit, each of you, about, in your fantasy perfect world, how would that work? You'd come to the media owner and they would introduce you to a creative director. What would you want to be doing with them if you could?
Yeah, I think yesterday the talk from New York Times, from the T-Brand studio, was a good example how that should be. So one of our main problems really, I mean, talking with a brand is that they say, oh, this is the story that we want to talk about. And it's so hard to really make them understand that this is maybe not something that somebody else is interested in, that's just they're interested. And that's where media, and with the heritage of media, to see this as a news value, this is interesting for people, really could help us to say this is a triangle between us as agency who say, okay, we bring you guys together. This is like a media, that the kind of content, how they understand it, that we really like. And then talking with a brand, how we can bring this all in the complete content strategy all together, so that, for example, New York Times content is it's not just one single piece, but it brings together all in the ecosystem, the complete story. So that's where I would say this is like the perfect combination how I would work together. And that's why I need to work with creatives and not with sales. I had the same problem with Facebook and YouTube, for example. They always brought the salesperson. They just told me where I can advertise, but not how we can create content or great ideas together. Because with this, there could be like big, cool ideas that we can do together if we work together. But if you just do advertising on your side, then it's about creating innovative banner formats. And we don't do that anymore.
I'm loving this. So far, media planner buyers, gone. Increasingly salespeople, largely redundant, because really we want to talk directly to the creatives, and I think that's probably true. Dirk, how would your perfect relationship look in terms of getting on with a media a media owner and its creative team?
On a specific brand, on a specific project, I would think it's a round table, and it's probably about 5 people around that table. It is certainly the brand stewardship on the creative side for the brand. It is the creative director or content producer on the media owner side. And I'd love to better integrate in that dialogue distribution people like us, including digital distribution, social distribution, media distribution, and PR, obviously. If you then identify a storytelling pattern that can build around about the media owner's content and therefore best facilitate the brand's storytelling, I feel like I'm in a dream. Yeah, feels good.
Okay, so I've got to come back with one. It's not a difficult question, but it's one that's going to arise in the minds of many people. This all sounds lovely, and I like it. I'm a former editor. A creative, brilliant. I'd love that. Somewhere in there, the difficult subject of money has to come up. So you sit down with the creatives and you come up with some brilliant ideas that involve using satellites to image the entire Earth. But at some point, someone's got to say, well, that is going to cost us $2.5 billion. And who's going to negotiate that? How does that... Is the ideal thing to come up with the great concept first and then go off and cost it? Or do you still go in with a budget and say, here's what we have to spend, now let's work out how we can make this happen?
Well, you start with a ballpark number that's important, but this must be like, if you see that the content is great, then you maybe give more as a brand side. So I think there's a good ratio that we try to consult our clients to. Before it was 1 to 10 for 1/10 for producing the content and 10 for paying that somebody is seeing the content. That's crazy. That's really crazy. And now we are shifting more and more in the direction of 6 to 4. So 6 for creating the value and 4 for using to spread it to have
That's a major change. So the emphasis is switching completely from paying for reach, paying for eyeballs, to paying for great content ideas. And that's got a real consequence for the way media owners need to think about how we are offering our services to you. Because you're more interested now in the creative concepts and the thinking and the production than you are in the reach.
The problem on brand side is often that the media budget is national, not international. And that's where our media agencies really could help to say, okay, we're using the 1 billion from Audi, for example, to create great content and not paying media publisher for advertising places, to really say, okay, how do we split the money for creating content worldwide? Because digital content is existing forever. If you just do banner, then of course it's just there for 2 weeks or anything. But if you're really producing content together, then it exists forever, and we can use the money more for content producing, value producing, and not just putting it in some places and buying this stuff there.
So Dirk, in your experience, how does that work? Quite often you've got a large central budget to produce a piece of great content. Can you then use it globally? Can you distribute that evenly across the world?
That is really depending on the brand and the infrastructure. And there's a couple of models that work perfectly well on a global level, and there's a couple of models that I believe are just crap. Anyways, but really building on the creative content production and the content idea and your perfect world. I think we all agree what it needs. If it's a fabulous piece of work, it needs distribution. It needs to be seen and in the faces and in the ears of our audiences. And this is something, coming back to your question, what can media owners do about it? I promise from our business model is really buying media, right? I promise that everyone that helps us to come up with greater ideas, to get out of the ghetto of advertising blocks, banners, whatever, and creates opportunities for the brand, we are the ones that are absolutely willing to shift the money from what I would name, in a media owner's perspective, ad revenues into content revenues. That is something we love because it's what our clients love, and that's something we want to do. So absolutely. It is difficult, like you were saying, because it needs massive change in media owners' operations and sales teams. It needs massive change at our end because we are 700 people used to a model that started back in the 60s and lasted pretty long, actually.
Yeah.
And it's our biggest task as an agency now to understand the new world of content and connections. We do understand it. We do have the technology. But coming back to your initial question in terms of talent and people and who's actually doing that, that's transformation. That's a massive change process. Technology and the understanding is not our biggest issue. Our biggest issue is to make 700 people, and you were saying it's a battle of talent, there's not enough talent around. So what we have to do as a big organization is really transform these people and educate and facilitate. And that's the biggest task for us in our very own agency. And I can see similar things on our client side and on our media owner side.
So in a moment, I want to come back to you both and ask you for your, let's call it your 30-second closing soundbite. What should our audience take away and do when they get home to make things better? But I think what's been really interesting about this conversation is that we've heard lots of really interesting things, two spectacular ones, that transfer of resources from the majority being spent on reach to a much greater percentage being spent on the actual content and the creative thinking, which I think is really exciting and really interesting. And secondly, that real need for a change in the fundamental model we're all using, that the sales function is perhaps not what we should be pushing in front of agencies any longer. And it's got to be a more integrated process. Yes, there's negotiation, but there's also, at the core of it is creative collaboration. And I think that's a really big change from what we've been seeing before. I guess if anyone's got a burning question, we could quickly take it, although we are getting short of time. And if not, then I would like to put you on the spot. And I'll start with you, Alina, just because you're next to me. I'm sorry to come to you first. If the entire room insisted that you gave them one piece of advice that they should take away and just do when they got back to their media companies, what would it be?
So I had different answers and it changed yesterday.
Right.
So I would really say you have to have a pro-digital culture and processes. If you are not willing to accept that the digital world is there and not just being used to it, but really loving it, then this will not be your future. So you have to get some help to change the culture and your processes and really mean it. So, and listen to them, honestly. So.
Okay, so if you're not there yet, and coming here, by the way, is a really good start, then let's get there more quickly. And Dirk?
Programmatic is now. I think get your hands on programmatic, no matter if it's creative or distribution and media. Programmatic is happening now. Get your hands on program. Get dirty on programmatic. You need to understand it now. It's really driving through your backyard, and it's only the initial step to more artificial intelligence in marketing.
Makes absolute sense. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I think that's been a really interesting conversation. I'm sure you're hopefully around for another hour or two at least. So you might need to hide in the break in case people come and insist that their creative teams are ready to talk to you. But for now, can I ask the entire audience to really thank Dirk and Alina for taking part. Great contributions. Thank you. Thank you.